All right, welcome everyone to another session of Consulting Growth Insights. I'm excited to chat with Alex Boyd today. Alex and I have known each other for a little while, and Alex, you're now the founder and CEO of Aware, which I'm a user of, which I love the tool, and you're also we'll call it maybe a recovering professional services owner as well.
Yeah.
You had a agency called Revenue Zen. So like that's where you and I first met back in the day. So Alex, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. I like harkening back to the services days, and I'm still in it, just sort of um, not just in it. I'll say at this point, but yeah, I've been doing it for almost 8 years, so
Yep.
it's
Yep.
good.
Awesome. Well, this is kind of why one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and chat about is a lot of the things that you'll typically see on LinkedIn about how to use LinkedIn as a revenue driver. It's very, I would say, SaaS focused, and I think it's easy to get lost in that as a somebody who is running a professional services firm, which is the majority of my audience. And you've kind of now done both sides. And just before we jumped on, you mentioned that you've kind of adapted your style from professional services to SaaS, actually.
Yeah,
So I think you're very qualified to talk about the differences. Um, I want to kind of set the stage, and I think the the main thing is doing this in the professional services environment, doing business development or sales in professional services environment is, let's say, drastically different than what most people deal with otherwise, right? If
yeah,
you're in it, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, then you probably don't. But it is very different. You're selling an intangible. You're selling expertise. You're selling reputation. You're selling a service that somebody can't really trial or get a demo of, right? Not really. I've got a whole thing about kind of how to
yeah,
build your marketing and whatnot as a demo, but that's a whole separate thing. Um, so and on top of that, high ticket, high touch usually, and long sales cycles, right? I mean, depending on what industry you're in, you could be looking at multiple years before there's a trigger event that actually allows somebody to go and market.
yeah,
You know, like say it's whatever med tech or biotech. It's you're on the product development cycle, which is whatever, 3 to 5 years sometimes. So it just completely depends on what you're doing, what you're selling. So um, with that, like let's you know let's talk about high level. How do you think about leveraging LinkedIn in the professional services environment? And really, let's focus on um, kind of the mindset that somebody should take, knowing all these things that I just mentioned, the long term focus and whatnot.
yeah. I mean, the the simplest way kind of harkens back to the reason I started on LinkedIn, which was because I was a head of sales at my last company, and my boss had said some comment about how people were kind of talking about how well I did this recently with turning around the SDR team. And so my original purpose for using LinkedIn was kind of to battle test my ideas and see if I knew what I was talking about. It was just philosophy purely. And then when I started getting people say, I resonate with what you said, and like we want to hire you guys, that's when it clicked that the philosophical alignment with what I was saying was the reason they felt comfortable wanting to hire us. And from there it just clicked like, oh, okay, it's you want to have people understand and be changed positively by what you're saying in terms of their own professional understanding. And if you can do that, then you just reach more of the right people, and that's kind of your intellectual funnel, so to speak. So I think about it as, well, why are people going on LinkedIn? And they're going on LinkedIn to learn mostly, to be entertained, to be stimulated in some way. I mean, it's the social media network for when you want to feel a bit better about doing social media than scrolling something, like TikTok or YouTube, right? So give the people what they want. Give them that professional learning that they're going for. Um, and if you know that that is the product you're supplying, then it makes it a lot clearer how to go about it. So you're not thinking about um, the checklist And so a lot of people think about the checklist stuff. Well, someone said I needed to post this much, I need to comment this much, so I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna get deals. But if you forget that the product is not doing a certain set of activities, like in this rote manner, it's actually changing minds in a way that makes somebody conducive to buy from you, then it just makes so much more sense. And you can kind of break and bend the checklist. It doesn't matter so much versus if you're just like doing stuff because someone said that's how you grow on LinkedIn. Um, this especially applies if you sell something expensive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like that framing, and it's interesting because I talk about like thought leadership in a very similar vein in terms of everybody goes, "Oh, we need to do thought leadership or we need to do social selling." It's
Yeah.
like it's that's an out the selling part of social selling, if you will, is an outcome.
Right.
The thought leadership itself, like becoming a thought leader is an outcome. Just yes, you need to do the work, but I think framing it in a this is an outcome I'm trying to get to, and then backing into, okay, well, if my goal is to become a thought leader so that people trust me and want to buy from me, because that's where those two things intersect in my mind.
Yeah.
What do I need to do? And that takes you out of this whole like post X number of times, comment X number of times, et cetera, which yes, there's value to that. Like I think having a checklist is a good thing
Hmm.
because you do that activity is important,
It is.
but
Yeah.
it's the framing of the activity. Like just because you throw a bunch of whatever 50 crappy comments out there doesn't matter. Right? It's not going to get you to that
Yeah.
objective. Or just because you post every day also isn't necessarily going to get you to that objective.
It might even hurt you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you like maybe talk about your process? Like how do you, especially when you were doing this for your agency back in the day? I say back in the day, it hasn't been that long for
No,
you,
yeah. Pretty
but
recently.
like, what was your like, what kinds of things were you doing, and what was your thought process behind doing them?
Um, yeah, good question. And it's funny you say like do thought leadership because I also react to that phrasing in a way that well, I assume people are probably not thinking about it in the right way if they're trying to do thought leadership.
Yep.
You don't do it, you are it. You know, uh, if you are if you have gained the experience and credibility through actually doing the work and building the business and practicing the craft, then just simply opening your mouth is thought leadership. You know, um, and so a lot of people either have not done the work to actually acquire the product that then can be shared through thought leadership. They just sort of are somebody who happens to have a business and um, posting does not mean thought leadership, but they just say post and they use the word thought leadership and that's
Yeah.
not what it is. And so I know it's kind of frustratingly vague to hear. Well, like, well, what is it? And I'm kind of trying to define it, but let's make it more concrete, like you said, with some examples of how did I do this with revenues in. So some examples could be like on the one hand, you think about how people come to be able to buy from us. First, they need to be aware of. I won't even say the brand, but the people. Um, Meaning they need to have seen my name, face, the profile. Then they need to have some sort of positive association. So they need to have not been turned off by what they saw. They need to not have the reaction of like this guy sucks or I don't trust this person. So there's just the like, I mean, you think of a classic marketing model, but it's not just awareness, consideration, decision. It's like the process of getting to know a person, and then it's once you're on somebody's radar, then it's the process of affinity. In this case, the process of them thinking that you can help them with that big burning pain point. So when I first started the agency, it was sales development work. It was outbound lead gen. So what my job was is to post in such a way and comment and do all the things in such a way that made people think um, Alex and his team know what they're doing at outbound lead gen and they're at minimum worth a conversation. And if you just get into the short list of consideration set for being worth a conversation, then you've done really the job you need to do on LinkedIn, and the rest is sales, which is a whole other thing we can talk for hours and hours about. But the job on LinkedIn is not really to sell; it's just to be in the well, you got to talk to them list. And if you to get in that list is just to have said enough insightful things that either are it can't just be things they agree with. It should ideally be things that change minds in a certain way or deepen understanding. It has to create some sort of intellectual motion for them. Um, if it's just static intellectually, like you say the things they already know and no motions happen, then you just kind of get written off as noise. So there has to be some sort of motion, whether it's depth or furthering or broadening or a different direction, a reframe. Something has to happen. Um, and I can't tell you what this is for your industry. It's whatever whatever your buyers happen to not quite understand that you do.
Yep.
Um, and this is the delightful part of this is if you don't know those things, then you don't deserve to be doing thought leadership, right? Um, so it really should only be done by the people who you know should be doing this, the people who are good at their craft. And there kind of is the discrepancy between a lot of the kind of cringe advice you see on LinkedIn about how to do this, quote unquote, and what works. Because a lot of what's posted on LinkedIn doesn't work, or it doesn't work for you. And so I've tried to spend a lot of time being specific about who I'm talking to. So instead of just saying you're doing SEO wrong, here are the 5 things to do. I'll clarify like private equity backed B2B companies spending 5 times as much on paid as they are on SEO usually miss these 2 things. Well, like that's much more specific, right? It kind of inherently by the phrasing of the post and opening it up reveals my understanding, my focus, and even just the terminology I choose lets people know that I understand it. Like for another example, someone I have an investment in and I coach was using the phrase monetize a lot. How to monetize your LinkedIn. And I had to say, people in professional services don't say monetize. That's not a word we use. We use pipeline often. We do use lead generation. We use proposals, contracts. We talk about win rates. We do not talk about monetizing anything. That just sounds weird. Like it sounds like you're not from our land, right? So even just the word choice at that level, like everything needed to scream, I'm one of you and I'm leading the charge. I'm not like over here trying to sell you. So, and you're taking people from I don't know you to I do know you to I have a positive impression of you to um, you belong in my consideration set because what you said makes it clear that you're at least worth the conversation. And once you're in the conversation, then it's a different topic. But the motion to get in that conversation is to be known and then to be known as insightful and then to be known for solving ideally one specific thing or a small amount of specific things. You can't be known for everything. That's not professional services. That's media. What different?
Yep. Yeah, I think the work I do with clients, it's that I would say most of them definitely struggle with kind of narrowing the scope of their thought leadership, and I
Yeah.
purposely put thought leadership into air quotes here because again, like we were talking about, it's and the way I like to talk about it actually is you're not a thought leader until other people tell you that you are, right? So I
Yeah.
think there's like
Exactly.
there's the have you had the expertise to become one? That's on your side of the coin, which is can you even become one? Period. Like if you haven't had enough experience, if you don't have enough kind of original thought and POVs and things like that, forget it. Because if all you can do is just parrot stuff that's out there, I mean,
Yeah.
ChatGPT can do that for us much
Yeah.
better, right? And then the flip side of it is, have you done it long enough and have you put yourself out there enough? Have you shared your thoughts enough? Have you delivered it? Are you trusted where other people are saying, oh, Alex is a thought leader in the space, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's that reframing. So the idea kind of is, and this is I think where the work and the outcome connect is you have to put in the work, you have to put yourself out there, you have to put your thoughts out there, you have to engage with people. And to be able to have the chance to have them say, "Yep, you're now a thought leader in this little microcosm of whatever industry group or whatever it is," right? And you kind of scale
Yeah.
from there. I think that's sort of That's how I tend to think about it, and then the thing that gets you in there is what I generally call your IP, right? You have to develop that. Like, what are these in the professional services arena? It's frameworks, methodologies, concepts, you know, maybe it's things like proprietary data or things like that potentially as well, but it's
Yeah,
in what
could
you
be.
do with it from there. It's something that gives you insight that other people don't have, like you said. Like you said, you know, they need to be changed positively by something that they've learned from you. And there has to be movement, like you said. You have
Yeah.
to reframe something in their minds, get them to think differently about their problem or their pain, whatever it is. That's kind of that first step.
Intellectual
And
movement.
yeah,
Exactly.
and
And
that takes time, and that's, I think, where we can talk about the work, right? Like, what does that take? You know, and I'm not asking you for, you know, post 5 times a week and comment X number of times. I think, again, I think a checklist is worthwhile,
yeah.
and anybody and everybody can find a checklist on all in all sorts of places about how much to do on LinkedIn. But like, how do you think about the work itself? Sort of, how do you structure it? Where do you get your ideas? You know, things like that.
Yeah. Assuming we've started with the idea is I have a message to convey that is changing an industry in people's minds, then you're right. Like the next thing is structuring the work. It's just as bad to have amazing ideas and for nobody to see them because you don't put in enough work to do distribution. I mean, to do marketing. Um, so yeah, if let's say we have our idea, for a long time, asset-based SEO was kind of the core idea I was leading with, and then it was a matter of distribution of the idea. Um, some examples of ways I distribute that idea are commenting on the right posts between 10 and 30 times a day. In 2024, I wrote approximately 9,000 comments in total on LinkedIn. That's more than you have to do by a long shot, but um, it will be effective if you have good ideas and you write a ton of comments. So most people are usually about 3 to 5 comments a day. 10 to 20 is really good. If you're upwards of 50, then you become more unignorable, right? Like, how could it not work? How could it not work if you are maintaining a certain level of quality in what you are saying everywhere all the time, right? You're not automating what you're saying. Um, and you're writing comments on 50 posts. Maybe 10 of them are on your own post at first and then 40, but like if you're even just 10 comments a day on other industry related posts that have to do with the underlying message you're sharing, how could it not work? How could you not get people on people's radars? It's almost easier to think about how could it not work than why would it work? Because like, well, what else are you doing? I mean, your people are going to notice, unless everyone you're replying to has all of the notifications turned off and never checks it, which is that's just unreasonable. It's not going to happen. It's got to work. So if I had only one thing to do, I would choose comments, um, because I can do a lot more with it. But because I have more than just comments, I obviously write content as well. And so the reason I like creating posts is because it gives me the chance to give people a clear narrative as to what I believe in some sort of order. I posted on average of 1.2 times per week for the first 2 or 3 years of Revenue's End. It was not a super high volume. I ended up being able to increase that to about two and change per week in the following couple of years. And then these days, I'm scheduled out in advance, a month in advance, most of the time, for 6 posts per week, and I'll often do a second one, bringing it up to about average of daily. So I've managed to increase it a lot, but the funny thing is that revenue sourced from LinkedIn for the agency on a monthly basis, if I look at just the graph of invoices to accounts paid by accounts where the source of the account was LinkedIn, then that's been pretty consistent the whole time, which is funny. Um, there's two reasons for that. One is you do need to do more than you used to have to do because saturation has occurred on LinkedIn. That's
Yeah.
that's true. Um, and I think too because well, one of the reasons is because I'm past the banner of marketing for the agency to others, so I'm sort of coasting on that pass, which is good. Um, but Also, I just got lucky in the first year, to be honest. I mean, I reached the right people with a really good message, and part of it is just, do you happen to reach the right person at the right time? But the data set now is there were about 135 agency accounts closed won over a 7-year period from LinkedIn. Um, and I think it was like 6.8 million or so far of revenue. So like a little bit under 1 million a year of revenue. Um, so I've gathered enough data to know that that's kind of what works, but the posting frequency has kind of increased over time. Um, I think the trick there is if you hear Alex is posting daily and you think, oh my God, I'm not doing well enough unless I'm posting daily, you got to work up to it. And without a system, it's not going to happen very well. I have a team. I have a someone who does my carousels and infographics for me at 35 bucks per graphic. That's great. It helps me a lot to have that. Another part of my system is I'll create my videos by taking my text posts and tweaking those into video scripts. So then I have my video content. Cool. Um, for those of you who are just craving using AI, I'll give you some ways that I use AI. Please don't lead with this. Please lead with the core message, the actual work and credibility you've gained over a hard-won career. But when you're at the point of making distribution easier, it is going to be easier if you're able to, for example, train an AI on your 100 best posts that you didn't write with AI, and then now you get to use the AI to start repurposing them, to telling you which ones have hooks that could be improved. Um, I mean, at this point, I'm getting posts that are 70% decent back from Aware AI by giving it my top 100 best posts on a particular topic and prompting it very simply for that. And then it obviously it flubs and I have to change, 30% of it. But like, I'm not asking ChatGPT, I'm asking me basically. And I'm getting help with the keystrokes essentially. Like the literal keystrokes of putting the thoughts down on paper is the thing that you can get help with from AI. Or video editing, captioning. I mean, obviously use AI for auto captioning, and I edit it and make sure it's right, or my editor does. But to go from less activity to more activity, yeah, you want a simple one: 10 to 30 comments a day and 2 to 4 posts a week. Sweet. That's the minimum. But from there, how do you get more? How do you move along the continuum from same level of effort to more output? It's systems, tools, and yes, some AI at that point. And part of that is team. So find a carousel infographic designer that you really like. Find a video editor that you like that works at a good rate, and you can spend a very low amount of money. That's assuming you know how to structure your thoughts and write well. If you don't necessarily know how to write well, you might want to just hire a full blown LinkedIn agency um, to do all this for you, because at that point it's going to be better to jumpstart you than to have you learn to write on your own. I just learned to write for many years, and now I don't need as much training in it. But if you don't, then while you're learning, you can hire an agency to help with that. Um, so that's kind of how I structure the work. It's definitely a team effort. Um, you don't have to do a ton of volume. Um, and then so when you're doing the top level LinkedIn work, then it gets into the kind of below the iceberg work. So let's say you're doing all this stuff. You're going to get a lot of activity coming in. You're going to get people DMing you questions, commenting on your post. You're going to get, do you want to join this podcast? And you're going to decide which of those requests for your time are good, reasonable, productive overall. Maybe you give more chances at first, and later on you are more selective with which requests for time that you put into. Um, so the management of the activity that results from it. I mean, some of those are leads, right? Some of those are like, you got to make sure that if somebody writes and says we want to hire you, then you don't miss it in your inbox. Like there's just some basics there of sales. But then there's the kind of other stuff around it. The reason I'm here now is because we had a random chat a few years ago that resulted from this kind of activity on LinkedIn. And so um, just keeping tabs and managing well the back end, all the stuff that happens below the iceberg as a result of all the stuff you're putting out in public. I don't have a script for that. Like, how many DMs per day should you do? Like, whenever it feels relevant. The actual number is probably going to be hundreds per month in terms of people you converse with. total unique people that you converse with. If it's less than 50, you're probably doing something wrong. Um, but if you're resorting to maxing out your connection request and DM limits and just like going that direction, then something is also wrong in the wrong direction. It's too much volume. Um, so in terms of the work that happens offline, um, if you could have, let's just say, one call ish per workday that isn't strictly speaking a sales call nor a vendor call, it's just somebody that you want to get to know who's also on LinkedIn. That's great at first. 3 months of that, that's 60 people. Sweet. All right. Maybe next month after that, you tone it down. You're doing 3 of those per week. Let's say after a while you've had coffee chats with 200 relevant people. Well, that's a lot of people who now have some understanding of you that are more likely to engage with your content on LinkedIn and more likely to refer your business. It all adds up. So it's that back end work that people often forget. They just post, they post these amazing hooks and these infographics and nobody reads it or does anything with it because
Or not the right
they've built no
people.
support. Yeah, there's not the right people. No one's watching. No one knows who you are. But once hundreds of people have had a good experience with you offline, then I mean the tables are turning in your favor. So that's a very long answer about the work, the structure of it, the ranges, the low and high ranges of it all, and the purpose of it. But I would say that the two most common things that are missed about the work is not doing enough engagement and not having enough offline conversations.
Yep.
Um, the most common thing people get is like, how often should I post? But that's almost the least relevant.
Yep. No, it's interesting. I would agree because I've been through that whole thing myself, and I've seen it both with clients and just the folks I've talked to. I think couple of thoughts come to mind as you went through that. Um, One is really thinking about it almost like a flywheel to a certain extent, in the
Yeah.
sense that um, to get noticed by the right people, you have to work on your ideas. Like your POV really has to hit. And if you're just starting out, it usually won't. Right.
Yeah.
Even when I mean starting out, I don't mean like you're fresh out of college. I mean, you haven't done this before. Like you might have been running your business for the last 20 years, but your reputation is just your client base and nobody else. Right. Like that's still starting out in my mind. You might not have that really solid, for that matter. Oftentimes you don't. Right. You maybe have whatever, say you have like a $5 million consulting firm. I've seen plenty of those that have positioning issues and messaging issues and all sorts of stuff. And they don't have
Yeah.
that clean POV because you can brute force it to that level, even like 10 million. So like you have to put in the work to get your ideas out there and to get feedback and like just work through that process. So there's value in just doing that.
Yeah.
Right. But then the flywheel is once you start getting noticed, then that gives you the revenue that you're actually looking for, which then drives you to want to do more of this. And it's this continual flywheel. So like thinking about it that
Right.
way.
People miss
Right.
that you're developing ideas with others in public,
Yeah.
and there's not this like detached. This is just a job. I don't give a shit about the ideas, which is very common. Is people get into this, but there's like a deep cynicism about just engaging with it and just saying like, I'm gonna put myself out there, put my ideas out there, take a stand on it. And there's a lot of just like, I just do this, I don't really care. And but I want to do thought leadership, for detached kind of like purely cold pipeline development reasons. And I noticed that fails too, because if you're cold detached pipeline development with no actual interest in actual thought leadership, but saying I want to do thought leadership, there's something missing, and people are going to, a lot of things will be missed that translate what you're doing to that below the iceberg um, level where it impacts your actual business growth.
Yeah. And I think this is
Um,
also where the difference between, say, if you're selling a product and a software to
yeah,
professional services, really you start seeing that because you don't have a demo that you can rely on. Be like, hey, you can be a little more detached. Let's just say, I mean, it's still not a good idea, but you
right.
could.
You can.
But people can see a product like, oh, okay, well, Alex seems to know what he's talking about. Let me check out his software. Oh, this is great. I'm going to try it. Right. Like, and then
Yeah,
there's a price point issue, whatever. But when you're selling a $250,000 consulting engagement, like that, there has to be this almost like um, like relationship built with the persona, even if you don't know each other just yet
Yeah.
formally, right? And
One
that's
way.
the idea, and you build that through the ideas that you share, that you hone, that you really make hit and stick after a while. And
Yeah.
you like you always can't have to keep. And the other thing is the flywheel keeps going, right? Because the market's always changing, right? With professional services, with marketing for sure, but I mean anything. You look at if you're in digital transformation or in med device engineering, like new technologies come on, trends and capital raising and financing shift and whatever, like, and you have to stay on top of it, and your ideas need to change, and you have to keep honing it, right? And that's also like where being a thought leader isn't static, right? That's the other thing is like, oh, I got there. Well, if you don't keep staying on top of it, you're no longer going
There's
to
a
be there.
exactly. There's a lot of people who were very popular for their ideas, and then they just
Yeah.
stopped having new ideas,
Yep.
and playing that same old song worked really well for 2 years, and it doesn't now.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the business choices you make too reflect on that, because if you have good ideas, but then everyone knows you to be an asshole,
Yep.
then that will carry over into the quality of your business results from it.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it's a relationship built, both the one-way relationship where as you kind of put yourself out there and allow people to get to know you, the two-way in terms of how you treat people, how you interact with people, um, and those have to add up. And it's you have to care personally about what you are putting out there and into the world, into other relationships. And if you don't, it'll show. So it's this that's the trouble with doing thought leadership as a service for others is you kind of have to vet for people who care personally and deeply
Yeah.
about what they're doing. I don't mean like in a kind of a bleeding heart way, but in like a they're very engaged with it in the way that if you read a Berkshire Hathaway annual report letter from Buffett, for decades has been so mentally, intellectually, and personally engaged with the work. It just shines. I mean,
Yeah.
his
He's just,
first
you can
annual
tell that
report,
he's interested in the subject
he's
matter.
interested. He's
Yeah.
extremely interested. And that has to come through.
Yeah.
So if you're credible, if you're good at what you do, and you're interested, there's no stopping you. And I think if you do those, you don't need a checklist because you're always going to be thinking about how can you be interested in other places and in other ways, right? Like, oh, how many podcasts should I do? I don't know. Um, do you have spare time? Do you get podcast requests? Do any of them interest you? Right? Do they? And so it's funny how like with people who have a lot of expertise in the space, I almost have to go a lot less on the numbers and activity
Yeah.
metrics like a sales rep would, and it's just like it's more of a point in the right direction of have you thought of this or um, like correcting misunderstandings than it is about stipulating an amount of activity.
Yep.
Um, because if you're interested, you're going to do everything you can to grow your point of view, and your business growth will closely follow the point of view growth.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I wanted to touch on that you're talking about is the offline conversation piece.
Yeah,
I it is, I think, extremely critical, and also one of the pieces that is so often missed, which is like I think people struggle with the idea, not with the idea, but with the like how do you take this online relationship that's starting, whatever. Maybe they've engaged on a couple of your posts. Maybe you've exchanged a DM. But once a DM happens, I think most people it's easier. It's like, hey, we should catch up or whatever.
yeah,
Right. But like before that DM happens, it's how do you cross that bridge, if you will, of okay, well, Alex and I have exchanged a couple of messages in the comments here and there. How do I bridge that gap to, hey, Alex, we should jump on a quick chat, like it'd be, whatever. Like
yeah,
that part is, I think, hard for people to do systematically. I think that's the thing is like you do have to put like this is where the work happens. Like give yourself a goal. I want to talk to whatever one person a week, whatever, however many, right? And what do you want to get out of those conversations? Like it's not a sale, like you said. It's and I think it's about then tying all of this into your understanding of the ecosystem. I think that's where the magic happens. It's okay,
yeah,
you're already like most likely you're already going to events. Great. There's an entire playbook that, I've developed. You probably have your own, and they're probably similar, I would bet, of what do you do pre-event and during event and post-event on LinkedIn. right? And
Yeah.
as you get more people in your orbit as well, then you might message specific people about the event you're going to. Be, hey, you attending as well? Or hey, I'm going to
Yeah.
this event and I'm going to be speaking. Whatever. Like all these things start tying together, and I think that again, that's where that just takes time to cultivate. But I think that's really what drives revenue, whatever a year down the line, is that it's connecting all those dots. It's not the I posted one every day and I commented on 10 posts a day. Like you can do that and have nothing happen if you don't do any of this
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I actually don't have an event playbook because I don't usually like events as much, but I do often use thinking of LinkedIn like an event to figure out how you should do those things of setting up conversations. Um, in what situations at an event would you suggest or just like start a conversation with one person? So there's attending a talk, giving a talk, joining a group conversation, and then having a one-on-one conversation. Just as when would you walk up to one person and talk just to them? Well, that's the same reason you should send a DM to somebody.
Yep.
Um, and it's I like not scripting out all those things. So I mean, reasons I've struck up DMs with somebody have been um, like, how do you keep your long hair not frizzy as a man? I've been wondering this, and you know,
So you're
and
saying
this is after
everybody should grow out
commenting.
their hair? No, I'm kidding.
The multiple, yeah, people have either commented on some way, and like just things like that, or what camera do you use for shooting your videos? They're turning out really well. I can't get mine to work. Um, it could just be like, how well do you know Mike Grinberg? Is it like personal connection or just a LinkedIn one? I noticed you're commenting on a bunch of his posts. Um, it could be like you and they also engage with the same post, and it's just so you have such a reaction to what was happening or being said that you have to engage. Maybe it's the Richard Vanderblom thing that happened. Like, oh man, like I saw that too. Do you know any more context about it? It's the same concept. So if you have this like rote way that you always say the same thing, or you just say, I wait for 3 comments and then I send them a DM with this script to request a meeting, you wouldn't do that in a conference, right? You wouldn't say, I asked 3 questions at their talk. I'm going to go up to the conference speaker and ask them for time on their calendar. It would be whatever was specific to the thing that they were talking about, or you were talking about. Is just like the social skills somehow got taken out of social selling, and it's weird. It's weird, but people do. Um, but everything can just be drawn back to like, would you do it in person? Would you do that at a
Yep.
cafe? Would you do that at a trade show? Like, if you would, then probably do it on LinkedIn. If you wouldn't, probably don't. And I can solve most questions of like, how often do you post? Should I say this with
Yep.
that same thing? It's just imagine you're not selling something. What would you do? That works really well. Pretend you are a consultant paid hourly to engage with the industry. Like, how would you approach it? That
Yep.
tends to work really well for me.
Yeah, no, I like that framing. Actually, that reminded me. This was probably 3 years ago. Maybe we had Steve Watt on the different podcast that we were running
Nice.
back then, and he framed it as LinkedIn is the world's largest 24/7 networking event. Like treat it like
Exactly.
that. And again, I agree with you where it's something about the being behind a keyboard and not in front of somebody
Right.
just makes us do weird stuff. And it's not hard, right? And I think that, and again, also kind of connecting the dots, the more you put out there, the more opportunity you have for somebody to comment or for somebody to see something and find something in common, right? And I mean,
Yeah.
most of the time the message is something similar like, hey, I saw, looks like we exchanged a message, something about X, Y, and Z. We should chat. It'd be interesting to have this conversation. No
Yeah.
different like if you are at an event or a dinner party or whatever, and I mean somebody says like, "Oh, well, I like the Vikings too." Oh, cool. We should chat more about whatever. I'm totally making that up. I actually don't care for the Vikings, but
Okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
um, I don't
That's the
root for
idea,
both
though,
of
right? Is like, like you said, dinner party. Like, you're just really vibing
them.
with somebody at a
Yeah,
dinner party, and just like, hey, man, do you want to get coffee sometime?
yeah,
Like, that's the idea. It's just like, it should be obvious that, like, we should get together, but you're right that the behind the keyboard thing has really erased some of the behavior that we normally have, well, most of us normally have in person. And that's just made it super, super weird to exist on LinkedIn. Like, in no other context in person would you comment the same thing on 50 people's posts with, the equivalent of like going up to the same person saying the same thing. Like, it'd be very, very weird. Or someone responds to your comment and you don't write back to them, like, consistently. Like, you
Yep.
never say anything back. You're just walking through life, just giving people the hand and walking away. Like, stranger says something to them, they respond, and you just walk away.
Yep.
It's very weird. So, and it's interestingly, I find that the younger people don't do that for whatever reason. I feel like there is. I don't see a lot of like Gen Z people doing this type of thing. They're more focused on the creative, the kind of like showing up authentically type of way, because they think they're so digitally native that they more closely equate it with real life.
Yep.
Whereas I would say like kind of my generation and one older has either goes two ways. One, they say this is no different from real life. The fact that I'm behind my keyboard means nothing. I'm engaging with people, or it's exactly the opposite. And like, this is, this is great. This is another tool for me to like do business in this sort of cold, weird, different way. And it kind of bifurcates. And you have some people who are, they just miss that. And then they go in on, these like spammy automation types of things.
Yeah.
And, it's weird because the mistake lies in thinking that it's very, very different from real life when it is not. It should be as close to we're in person as possible. If you do that, freaking golden. And I say this as somebody who, I'm not a natural socializer. So, if you think about like, I often think about like my adolescence was spent thinking about that. Like, how do I do this? So I've arrived at this position, having spent more time thinking about it than the average person. If you never had to think about it, you probably get to LinkedIn and there's no, you just sort of always did it naturally. And so you're easily shaken by, oh, this is LinkedIn, it's different. Whereas people, I think, who were maybe more introverted and had to think about it a lot, they think about this too and realize it's no different and have an easier time doing so. So yeah, it's don't think about it as so different. Picture you're at a trade show, picture you're in front of someone, picture the dinner party, visualize that, and then that's your like, should I send this
Yep.
DM, and if so, what should I say? Test, I think.
Yep. The other thing that might be interesting and to dive into a little bit is that I think people struggle with is when and how to ask for the business conversation. Because at some point,
Yeah,
let's be honest, this is why we're doing it.
of
Like,
course.
yes,
Yeah,
you get to meet interesting people. It's fun, whatever. Sure, but if it's not driving revenue, you wouldn't be here, right?
exactly. And I'm
So
probably more on that than most. Yeah,
yeah. So, like, I think I've seen it swing the other way where people are like, okay, I'm going to post, I'm going to engage, I'm going to help, and we're going to do this, but there no business conversations happen.
yeah,
Like, how do you think about that? Like, what sort of the when and the how?
yeah. And to be clear in everything I'm saying, the business conversation is the structure. Like, the fact that you are in a business and have an offering should be imbuing everything you do. For the same reason, it's kind of weird if, again, conference or trade show, someone just like really wants to talk, but um, it's not clear what business they're in or why it matters. That's weird. That's like, well, why do you want to talk? It's more comforting for people when you have a good business reason to want to talk about something, because then they know, like, okay, this person's in XYZ business, so I can sort of understand why they would want to chat, blah blah blah. And so,
That's a really good point, actually. I'm totally like thinking back to several conversations I've had in like a group setting. And you're like, somebody that you don't know joins in, and you're like, and something just feels off. And you're like, wait,
yeah,
hey, what do you do exactly?
make it clear what you do. It's so much
Yeah.
easier for people when they know like the structure of how you're approaching this. Um, So yeah, and again, there's two paths you can take. One is, um, never care about other people. only spam your message, your offer, whatever it is. That's like, okay, we get what you do, but we don't want it. On the other hand, it's like you never mention your offer, what business you're in. It's sort of vague what you're even doing here. That's weird. It's like, what do you want from me? Because I don't know. I don't believe you. I'm skeptical of you and what you're doing here. So go away. Um, the middle, some people do this extremely well, is the middle zone where um, they suggest business conversations, but they're relevant and it's clear why you want to talk. Um, you know, um, Mike, I noticed you run a podcast on um, growth marketing for professional services companies. I thought it'd be really relevant if you were to speak at this conference we have coming up in a month. We need another speaker for this particular topic. Would it make sense to chat for 10 minutes in the coming days about that? Oh, good. I can just evaluate yes or no whether I want to take that versus like, Mike, should we have a virtual coffee chat soon? What do you want? I wanna know what you want before I take that damn virtual coffee
Yeah.
chat. Like, it's weird. It activates a this person is other instinct in us when you do that. So, can the virtual coffee chats, unless it's extremely clear why you're doing it, but don't take it so far that all you do is spam your sales message. Um, your care for others and your goal of having your offers be relevant should be clear from your message. Um, it's not that you should never sell, like, you should be proud of what you're selling and not be shy about it, right? Like, whatever it is you do, like, don't be shy, but, that doesn't mean take the easy way out. So doing the mental work is to identify who and why should either buy from you or work with you in some way. It doesn't have to all be purchasing. It could be supplier, partner, media. There's all sorts of business reasons to chat other than a direct
Yeah.
sale. But if it is a direct sale, great. That's fine. Like, be clear about that. Noticed you're running LinkedIn profiles as a service for 12 other clients. Loving your content. Noticed that you were posting stats from Shield app recently. Um, Not sure if you like Shield 2.0 or not, but if it makes sense, Aware's been taking a lot of Shield's customers recently, including a link to a comparison page. Be great to chat about it in the coming days if you want, but if you love Shield, no big deal. Oh, it's so clear. I'm proud of what I'm selling. They can evaluate yes or no based on what I'm saying, and it's not weird. I'm still obviously selling. I'm not beating around the bush, but I'm also taking the time to say like, here's the reason that I'm selling to you. Now, I think it could help you, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yeah.
Same thing with professional services. You can do this with SEO. Hey, I don't want to interrupt. I know that you just posted about your uh, quarterly wrap. Sounds like you guys are growing really quickly. Selfishly couldn't help but notice that you're ranking on the end of page two, whereas your main competitor, blah blah blah, who you mentioned in your post, is still on page one. I'm really rooting for you guys. If it make any sense ever to have a talk about how we could help you rank better for that term, happy to do a free 30 minutes. And if it does make sense to engage us, cool. If not, then that's fine too. But either way, I thought I'd offer some value. Ah, sweet. I know you're selling SEO, and here's the reason why. Cool. I can either say yes or no, or maybe or whatever. But it's not weird. I know what's going on. I can evaluate. It's that vague in between zone where you wouldn't normally do it socially, but you do it on LinkedIn, and it's weird. And that's why you're not getting meetings. Is you either don't say anything at all, you're a wallflower, or you're weird in some way. To be frank, and those are the
Yeah.
two main varieties of weird. Is like you said, it's over spam or too vague. Both of those are bad.
Yep. And for professional service, I think you kind of highlighted again, the difference, which is like for your software business right now, you have the ability to go, hey, saw you mentioned Shield, blah, blah, blah. Let me send you to a comparison page, right? Like the professional services person doesn't have that. But what you highlight there, though, is this need. I think, again, this gets back to building your ideas and your thought leadership presence and your IP, the frameworks, the whatever. Like, so you have assets to use, right?
Yeah,
Whether
you
that be
could
your
link into
podcast, your
that.
newsletter, your articles, your one sheeters. And I don't mean like the crappy one sheeters that just say what your business does, but like
Yeah,
something about your frameworks or whatever. Like those types of assets allow you to go, hey, I saw you post about whatever. I just did this the other day. um, "Hey, I saw you post about um, your delivery model. Thought you might be interested in these articles I've written about positioning and how the delivery model really only matters in context of your IP. Check it out. Let me know what you think." Right? Like that's a and that's my cold outbound. Like I think maybe the guy engaged with a few of my things. I don't remember now, but like
Yeah.
give yourself the opportunity to do that. But the only way to do that is to do the work that we were talking about.
Right.
I think this is the where I also think companies, especially professional services, struggle is they most of them do like the traditional content marketing, if you will, approach, which is we're going to do case studies, which are kind of bland. We're going to do white papers, which are very bland and don't really offer much value. And then maybe we have a blog here and there that's also generally kind of bland. And that's it, right? And then we're going to post about it, and that's that. But the no, one or two things happens. Either those assets just don't get used, even if they are good, or they're just not very good and they can't be used. And like the whole idea again here is like, how can you create what assets can you develop that you can use in outreach, whether it's cold or warm, to
Yeah.
create these to start conversations,
Assets are
you
good,
know?
and if you're able to take it one half step further and give people a taste of how,
Yeah.
like, even the direction in which you might apply
Mhm.
the thinking in those assets, all the better, right?
Yep.
So if you have a I wrote a 52-page ebook that's like kind of a white paper, but like it's actually good. I spent a long time on it. It's formatted well. Like it's not dry.
I've
It's
seen it, so
yeah, okay, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, it's good. I would like to think it's good. I spent a fuck ton of time on it. And so I wouldn't just send that and say, "Hey, you might enjoy this ebook."
Yeah.
Unless, you just requested the ebook, in which case, yeah, fair enough, here you go. But even if you did just request it, I would still say, I think page 19 is probably most applicable for you, where we talk about the search intent analysis of a particular page being um, align with one set of keywords. I noticed this on your soc 2 page that it's there's also a blog about it that competes with the search intent
Yeah.
on it. So when you're reading it, make sure to stop on that page, and if it makes sense to talk, let me know. So I'm not going to stop at just the asset. I'm going to try to apply even a little bit, um, which does two things. One, they can kind of get a sense of, this is a taste of how it might apply to me, which is what they care about. And then two, it's just a little show of effort. Um, so if this is a good lead that you're talking to, don't just send the asset. Do a little call out about it. I'm not saying give away the application, like that is what they pay you for, but a taste of
Yeah.
the application. I mean,
Yeah.
give them a Costco sample of your implementation. I'm
Yeah.
not saying the whole pack of waffles, but this much. How does that look? Goes a long way. So just kind of start doing the work 2%. Um, and that's how to take any asset, even a case study is, do something that indicates I didn't just create this in once and I'm spamming it out. I'm created this once, but here's the part that I think you might like.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. No, I like that. And again, especially in the frame of in services, there is no demo, right? But this is kind of your way to
it's kind of a demo.
sort of demo it, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. Um, let's really briefly, before we wrap up, talk about the who, if you will, meaning who in these firms should be doing this. I think, and there's obviously, well, what kind of firm is it? Let's say it's small to mid-size, 5 to 150 people. Um, who in your who should be doing this work? I my take. I want to hear yours.
Um, it always depends on the people in the firm. The default answer, not knowing any specifics, is a partner's account should be the one it's focused on, but the partner can get plenty of help for executing it from the team. Some exceptions can be made for you have a team member who's a lifer, they maybe own some stock in the company, they're part of the ESOP or something, where like they're just a better fit. Like, great, that's fine. But the default answer is I'm always going to start with whichever partner is most gung ho about this, or partners. Um, but I don't mean that means that partner should be taking video selfies, writing all the posts themselves. It doesn't have to be that way, but it should center on one of the people who is a significant shareholder in the firm, um, you can't pawn this off to your marketing manager. Um,
Yep.
that because they are not credible at the subject matter expertise you have. I mean, unless they are, in which case, great. But like, don't pawn it off to somebody who does not have the credibility you do. It's not the point. But you can get help with the operations of managing the effort.
Hmm.
It should be imbued with you. You should stand by it, but you don't have to again write all the keystrokes. And people get hung up on like who does the keystrokes of writing the content. I do not care. I do not care if it's ChatGPT. I do not care, if your marketers dictated it to me. Like I can go Dr. Seuss on you with this. It just put it out there and make sure it's aligned with what the partner and maybe even the whole firm believes if you have a cohesive narrative, which you should. Um, but don't pawn it off. The instinct is to say, we'll have the intern do us on the company page, and that's not going to work. Nobody cares about company pages usually, and your intern doesn't know what they're talking about. Um, so you have
Or
to
even, I mean,
develop
honestly,
the
in
writing
professional
practice.
services firms, your CMO or your head of marketing oftentimes doesn't really know what they're talking about. Not
Usually,
not to the
yeah.
level that you do.
Yeah, they shouldn't be writing. They should be making sure that the effort to get the
Yeah,
partner's writing and beliefs is as streamlined as possible. That's the job of marketing. Unless you're a CMO at a marketing agency, in which case,
that's a different
again, it all comes back to like who the hell knows what they're talking about well enough to be the subject matter expert, and that could be in theory anybody. Um, but for asset building and financial reasons, I prefer having it be a partner's account because
Yeah.
um, I don't mind somebody who could leave and does leave. That's very workable. But the longest retention forecasted person is usually a partner.
Yeah.
So we pick that person by default.
Yeah, and I think there's also, to a certain extent, it's a shortcut as well, because a lot of the time the partners have the deepest network already. So
Yeah,
even if their LinkedIn network isn't as deep, their network is incredibly deep directly.
right.
And they generally do have clout in the industry, even if they're not like on the speaking circuit or whatever.
People know them.
Um,
Yeah,
People
that's why
know
you
them,
you
people trust them, etc. Right.
you write
So I
one
think
post for them, it's gonna go great because, "Oh, wow, this is so easy." Well, yeah, we're simply activating all this latent clout that you
yeah,
do already have, but you've done nothing with, so that makes it look
yeah,
easy, but yeah, it's a quick one.
yeah. Now, maybe one last thing to throw out there is, I agree with you in the sense of, I don't like. I used to not like people using ghostwriters, but at the end of the day, like, I've changed my mind on that over the last couple of years. I don't care. It doesn't, as long as the ideas and the subject matter is theirs. It doesn't, like, I don't think it's a problem. It's like, look, if you don't know how to write, you don't have time to write. Okay, okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
a lot of very
but the
famous works were written by other people. They just were
yeah,
maybe the original person dictated it or dictated most of it
yeah.
or talked to them about it. The Bible was not written by Jesus. Jesus had ghostwriters. Top that. Like, yeah, as long as the ghostwriter is good, it cares.
Yeah.
Like, the same principles
Yes.
apply to that relationship with you and the ghostwriter, but it doesn't actually matter who did the keystrokes. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. And maybe where to wrap it up kind of is, the like, don't outsource the communication part.
Yeah,
You can outsource the the process, you can outsource the distribution to a certain extent, but you can't, like, I don't know. I don't think you can outsource the commenting as an example or any of that stuff.
much
Like, you
harder.
have to, you have to put in the time, and that has to be you as the partner or whatever. Um, so
I've seen some limited exceptions to that, but, you have to really train the person doing the
yeah,
comments on what you know, who you know, how you know them, so there's an onboarding curve there, but like you said, the principle is that it has to be you, whether you are training somebody or you are doing it yourself. Um, yeah, so you can, it's just expect to have to train the person, and work with them, which is fine, but, don't take shortcuts. I'm noticing a theme, don't take shortcuts.
yeah. Don't take shortcuts. It's probably a good place to wrap it. Alex, thank you, for anybody that's still on. There's a few people still on. I highly recommend checking out Aware. That'll Alex has got it. I use aware.co. I'm a fan of the platform, so and I use it personally. I think it makes engaging significantly easier and more streamlined. So definitely check that out if you have not. And for uh, other than that, I'll be back next week. So we'll see you then.
Then you might.
Thanks all.
Ah.
All right.